What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the Phoenix comics, and we get to see what is now the most powerful version of the Phoenix Force in Marvel, which actually seems to transcend the White Phoenix of the Crown. And I'll talk about why that's kind of bonkers once we get to that part. But for those of you guys who need to be caught up, because it's been a little while since we caught this, you basically have three main players going on in this story, right outside of the Phoenix herself. You've got Thanos, PERRIKUS, and Adon. Now, Thanos basically has the Warlock's Eye, and he's using it to try to seize control of the universe because he's Thanos, and Thanos does stuff like that. PERRIKUS is a member of a race called the Dark Gods, and we'll talk about them here in a little while. And Adon is a girl whose entire world was just kind of caught in the crossfire of it all, right? Which is to say the world was collapsing, Phoenix tried to save it, she couldn't, and ultimately everybody but Adon was killed. And ever since then, PERRIKUS has basically been using her as a means to restore the Dark Gods. Now again, we'll kind of bring all that information back together. But up to this point, Jean's just been fighting some pretty heavy hitters over the course of Marvel's history. Gore the God Butcher, the Black Order of Thanos, so on and so forth. In this instance, she comes face to face with Thanos himself. But initially, this comes by way of a coming together of various superheroes that were assembled by Jean Grey. It's kind of a ragtag band, one that you wouldn't normally see together. But in all honesty, I kind of dig this roster, and I wouldn't mind seeing a team book, right? You've got Carol Danvers, who's referred to as the best tactician that Jean's ever seen. I don't quite know if I agree with that statement. You've got Rocket Raccoon, you have Richard Rider Nova, and you have Sif. They've all kind of been brought together for a variety of different reasons. Of course, Rocket Raccoon is brought here due to his technological prowess. Richard Rider is brought here because of all the knowledge he has of the known universe, being a member of the Nova Corps, exploring pretty much everything that can be explored across the whole universe. And then, of course, you have Sif, who's brought here because of her knowledge when it comes to Asgardian history, because the Warlock's Eye is literally an artifact that is known very well by the Asgardians. And so at this point, you have Jean Grey, who basically contacts Adon. Now, Adon has very much been resistant to Jean, and a lot of that's because the destruction of her world was, for the most part, inevitable. There wasn't really any way to save the planet, at least not at that point in time. Jean had still come into possession of the Phoenix, and a lot of the story that's been going on here has less to do with Jean's possession of the Phoenix Force per se. She's had it before, and she knows how it works. It's more of her coming to terms with her own history in relation to the Phoenix. So she's largely been kind of hesitant to use its power to its full fruition. And again, that's one of the things that we're actually going to see here. But when it came to the character of Adon, because of the fact that she is in a lot of ways the key to Jean Grey's ability to succeed here, because she knows what's going on in the inner camp of PERRIKUS, Thanos, and all those guys, Jean tries to reach out. And yet again, much like previous instances when she's tried this, that Adon's basically pushing her away. She doesn't want to have anything to do with her. And so Jean does the only thing she can do. She shows Adon her own history. And Jean's history is one of tragedy. It's tragedy, loss, sadness, almost every step of the way. Now, there are great moments there, right? Meeting Cyclops, falling in love with Cyclops, the two of them kind of forming a life together, the idea that she was brought into the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, that she didn't really come from a bad upbringing, but it was one of the first times in her life that she actually felt like she had a place among people who were similar to her, especially because the emergence of her powers were so brand new. But when you talk about the loss of her friend Annie, her entire time as the Dark Phoenix, dying and then resurrecting, of course, again, Marvel kind of changed that with the whole Dark Phoenix thing, but the fact is, right, she's lost so much over the course of her life. And so with Adon seeing this and recognizing this, she realizes her and Jean are not that dissimilar in terms of how their histories have unfolded and the experience of loss. And so through that bit of bonding there, where Adon cannot necessarily tell Jean where Thanos is at, she can show Jean where Thanos is. And that's where Jean says, we have a plan. Now, the first thing that Jean tries to do along with Rocket and these guys is to split up the forces of Thanos. The easiest way to defeat them is to defeat them when they're divided. And so between the abilities of Rocket Raccoon, who can basically disrupt the communication devices of Thanos' generals, so basically the Black Order and so on, they can kind of split them all apart, right? And then fight them all on individual levels. And that's really what happens here, right? Like once everyone but Jean confronts the Black Order, everybody starts taking pot shots at these guys. The thing about this is that Thanos comes out and observes everything, and he makes this really, really interesting statement where he says, "That was clever, using Rocket Raccoon to get my generals to abandon their mission. It weakens my stronghold to remove them from the field." Now understand here, Thanos understands the significance of Rocket Raccoon, and this was established in Dan Abnett's Annihilation story when he was handling the Marvel cosmology. There's this amazing moment where Thanos is essentially resurrected, and he almost kind of goes mad for a few minutes, and Rocket tells him, like, calm down, right? If you don't calm down, we're gonna drop you in a gravity well, right? A black hole, and you're gonna spend the rest of eternity experiencing infinite existence, because a black hole can't destroy you, but it can keep you trapped. So unless you want to live forever, then you need to chill. And that's where Thanos actually came down, right, and started to relax. So Rocket is one of the very few characters out there who will literally just give it to Thanos the way that it is, right? It's a really fascinating aspect of his character. And so when Thanos is observing all of this and realizing that his generals are being split up, that's when he says, well, then the most logical thing here for the Phoenix to do, who I don't see, is to attack me directly. And so he immediately predicts the attack and then starts to go on the counterattack. Now, a lot of this is writer Stephanie Phillips kind of shifting up or adding to the way that the Warlock's Eye has historically worked in Marvel Comics. Ever since its introduction in Thor 129 in Marvel back in 1966, the Warlock's Eye had largely just been used as a mind control device, and really nothing more. That's all it really did, was just allow the wielder to control the wills of the people around it. But the way that Thanos uses it, and one of the things that's talked about in this story, is that the Warlock's Eye may have never achieved its full potential, so no one really knows what it's completely capable of, that it could be one of the most powerful artifacts in existence. And in fact, the ability of Thanos to counter the power of Jean while wielding the totality of the Phoenix Force would indicate that it is. More so than that, it actually starts to corrupt her. Now, this is an important thing to understand. The Phoenix Force can be corrupted. Despite being a cosmic entity, it can be twisted and it can be manipulated time and time again. In fact, coming out later this week, I'll have a video sort of talking about multiversal cosmic entities. And one of the things that we'll talk about is the Phoenix Force. Yes, we made a video about all that stuff like 9 years ago, but it doesn't hurt to revisit that stuff, right? It doesn't hurt every once in a while, every few years, to come back and kind of rehash it, because, you know, it's always new to somebody. And so the Phoenix, with the ability to be corrupted, that's exactly what happens. That Thanos makes this statement where he says, the Phoenix is all life and creation, but I serve death. How does it feel, Phoenix, knowing you're going to destroy the entire universe? Because literally he starts using her powers, and if we're being honest with ourselves, starts to create something that's not that dissimilar from the Jasper's warp. Now, of course, Thanos has never met Jim Jaspers. He has no idea who Jim Jaspers is. Maybe he does. I don't know. Right, but the two of them have never encountered each other. So it's not like Thanos knows what the Jasper's warp is. But you're talking about essentially a reality distortion tornado emanating from the Phoenix itself. And so at that point, with Jean under his control, she actually, on a kind of subconscious or conscious level, reaches out to Adon. And the agreement that's struck between the two of them is that Thanos is looking to seize the power of the Phoenix. The best thing that can be done here is for the Phoenix to travel to someone else. And so the two of them agree that Adon will take control of the Phoenix, since Adon is now an ally more than an enemy. And so when that happens, Thanos is initially caught off guard, right? He's a little surprised here, but at the end of the day, he says, I mean, as unpredictable as that was, and as shocking as it was for you to be willing to give up your power of the Phoenix, the reality here is that yes, you bested me, but you created your own worst enemy in the process, because seemingly Adon was playing possum the whole time, right? She agreed to side with Jean Grey. She agreed to give this illusion that she was a friend of Jean, knowing that at some point, Jean would let her guard down. Now, a lot of that goes into Adon having been taken by PERRIKUS following the destruction of her world and being raised with his philosophies, in the sense that unlike the traditional superhero mantra that's perfectly summed up, right, with the Spider-Man statement, with great power must also come great responsibility, that from PERRIKUS' perspective, power is something you wield in order to impose your will on others. He's a very malevolent being. And so with Adon being raised with that philosophy and taught that philosophy over time, she did exactly that. That initially, she goes to try to destroy Jean, talking about how great she's felt, how powerful she feels, in relation and in stark contrast to how powerless she's historically felt. Now, of course, Jean, being a host for the Phoenix, initially tries to take the Phoenix back. And this is where Stephanie Phillips, as awesome of a writer as she is kind of cooking the books a bit. The reason why is because when it came to stories like Phoenix War Song, Phoenix End Song, that covered the relationship between Jean and the Phoenix Force itself, the two of them are basically perfectly in sync, right? They are in perfect harmony with each other. It's what allows Jean Grey to achieve the White Phoenix of the Crown level, the perfect host for the Phoenix Force throughout all of creation, the entirety of the multiverse. No matter what universe you're in, Jean Grey is always the perfect host. And the main Marvel Universe Jean Grey stands above all the others. And so this is kind of introducing this idea that the Phoenix can be taken from Jean and Jean doesn't have total control of it. But at the same time, much of what Stephanie Phillips is doing here is focusing on Jean's uncertainty about herself. And that's where the story transitions. Because in that moment, the Phoenix Force is actually split between both Jean and Adon. And Jean herself is whisked into her own mind, into her own past, when she was on the blue area of the moon. Now, for those of you guys who are not overly familiar with Jean's history, the blue area of the moon is a very important part of her history, and there's a reason why she's being forced to revisit all of this. The blue area of the moon became significant in the aftermath of the Dark Phoenix saga. The reason being because Jean Grey as the Dark Phoenix had basically gone insane, right? And it actually destroyed an entire star system and killed everybody within that solar system. And so when she was put on trial by the Shi'ar Empire, it was a trial by combat. And the X-Men at the time had come to her aid to fight alongside her. What ended up happening is, of course, the X-Men essentially lost. And so that was one of the first times in Marvel that Jean had to confront the idea and cope with the idea that her actions as the Phoenix had drastic consequences, not just for the universe itself, but for the people that she loved dear. It was very possible they would die in their attempts to face off against the Imperial Guard, arguably one of the most powerful teams to ever exist in the history of Marvel Comics. And that's why this whole story, focusing on the idea of Jean's past, her coming to terms with it, is important. Because what happens is that as she's kind of reliving this moment, she discusses the nature of the Phoenix. And she says, the beginning is nothing. Before the cosmos took form, we were a flicker in the darkness, a manifestation of the universe's yearning for life. From the first thought that echoed through the emptiness, we were there, a guardian of creation, a catalyst of evolution. All life emerges from our flames, and so too shall all life return to them. We are the cycle of life itself, the promise that from every ending comes a new beginning. Now, this is a particularly important statement because it really kind of works in relation to the Phoenix, and kind of talking about the video that we made when it came to the history of Marvel, it does provide a frame of reference to the beginning of the Phoenix. One thing that we'll address in the video later on this week is that nothing about this indicates that the Phoenix existed before the first firmament and predates all of existence within the Marvel Universe itself. Again, we'll kind of bring that point to a head and talk about how, for the most part, it's people making things up when they just kind of draw those conclusions. But the bigger point here is that when you have Jean dealing with this and looking at her own past, she sees the other X-Men here. There's Nightcrawler, and there's Wolverine, and Cyclops, and Storm, and Colossus, and Angel, right? It's the team and the people that she knew and loved so much, but they're facing off against the Dark Phoenix here. And that's when she starts to realize the Phoenix Force is shifting these memories around. It's changing things. This is not how it originally played out. But the reason why this is happening is because Jean is being made to confront her own dark history by the Phoenix itself. And it's one of these things where it's kind of drawing in this idea that if Jean is truly going to be able to harness the power of the Phoenix, she has to come to terms with her own history. Now, for the character of Adon, she is also being used by PERRIKUS to a degree. It's not nearly as important as what's happening with Jean, but it does serve a pretty significant purpose once you get towards the end. So we're going to kind of sidetrack that for a second and focus on Jean for the most part. The reason why is because as this fight goes on between the X-Men and the Dark Phoenix, that Jean officially steps in. Now, of course, literally, this is Jean fighting her own history and whatnot, but metaphorically, it's her learning to get past it. And it's one of the things that she has to deal with here is she talks about the nature of the Dark Phoenix as it relates to her. And that's why Jean literally in addressing it says, I sacrificed myself because I thought it was the only option to control the powers of the Phoenix. In this particular instance, it was Jean flying herself into a sun and basically ending her own existence to basically bring an end to the conflict or the, I guess, trial by combat with the X-Men and the Imperial Guard. And that's where the question is asked by Jean, is that what you want for me to do it again? And the Dark Phoenix asks, is that what you want? And Jean says, when I became the Dark Phoenix, I didn't understand the power that was inside of me. I feared it. And that fear created the Dark Phoenix. And she says, but now I've found balance with this power. But the question of the Dark Phoenix is, have you found peace? That's the question. And that's really where Stephanie Phillips is splitting the difference here. That what Stephanie Phillips is essentially saying is that with stories like Phoenix War Song and Phoenix End Song, where it addresses the White Phoenix of the Crown, that Jean is the perfect host for the Phoenix, up to that point in time, it's Jean finding balance between herself and the Phoenix and using its power in such a way that no one else across the multiverse can. But she never really found inner peace. She never came to this understanding that yes, as a superhero and as a wielder of the Phoenix Force, she didn't really grasp the power she had, the ability to obliterate entire universes, the amount of death and destruction she could cause if she was carried away with her own abilities. And that's why she says, how can I find peace with the things that you've done? The things that we have done. And the Dark Phoenix says, you want so badly to redeem yourself, but you believe redemption does not exist. And Jean says, no, that's not true. I do believe that redemption exists, but not for me, not for what I've done and the people I've harmed. I don't deserve peace and redemption. And that's where the question is asked by the X-Men, right? Then how can you be a hero? You can't help others until you help yourself, Jean. And she says, I tried so hard to be more than my past, to do enough good to balance out what I did, but it will always follow me, even to the deepest reaches of space. I hear the voices of all those who died every single time I close my eyes. And the response of Storm here is, you will never be able to outrun or outfight your past, Jean. We all have hurricanes in our soul, but that power can be harnessed. And that's where Jean kind of starts to put two and two together. And she says, well, then maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not about running from my own history. Maybe it's not about erasing the darkness, but using it. That is the true power of the Phoenix. The power to transform, not the world, but yourself. And that's really what it is. Right? It is the ultimate lesson of life, right? We as humans are reactionary. We always kind of screw up and we always kind of get things wrong because we don't know what the consequences of our actions will be in the long term. And while there is that inclination to carry that guilt with us, right? To beat ourselves over the head with our own past mistakes, the real goal should be to learn from the past mistakes, to learn from the things that we've done before. What Jean Grey always struggled with and has recently struggled with is fear of the Phoenix. What if I lose myself again? What if I lose control, right? What happens then? I become the Dark Phoenix of the Crown. Whereas instead, she should have been doing this the entire time, right? Coming to this realization and saying, okay, the Phoenix is a manifestation of the multiverse itself. The power it has is incredibly vast. It is astronomical, the things that it can do. And if I do not control myself, I could destroy everything in existence. But there is a time and a place for me to be able to use this power, to wield this power, and to respond to it in varying emotional states, to basically experience a kind of emotional intelligence with the Phoenix. And so what ends up happening is you switch back over to Adon, and you end up realizing that with her portion of the Phoenix Force's power, because of the fact that the Phoenix can create realities and do pretty much anything it wants to, the expectation of PERRIKUS and the other dark gods who were now here with him is that Adon would bring the Shadow Realm into the main Marvel universe. Now, this all goes back to the old Thor comics, specifically the Dan Jurgens run. And the idea behind it was that the Shadow Realm was a realm that was almost kind of like the moral antithesis to Asgard. So instead of having your traditional Asgardian gods, who are for the most part heroes, that the idea of the dark gods is they were just straight up villains. And so their land was literally locked away in the Shadow Realm by Odin. And they've always been trying to find a way to return. And coming across someone like Adon, as far as PERRIKUS was concerned, was the perfect way to do it. If they can twist her, if they can turn her into a dark version of herself, and then get her to steal the power of the Phoenix, likely using the Warlock's Eye of Thanos, that they can in turn use the power of the Phoenix to not only bring the Shadow Realm back, but to bend the entire universe to their whim. Now, most of you guys are probably aware when it comes to Thanos, it's a tenuous alliance at best, right? So any chance he gets to break the alliance and to basically bend you to his will, that's exactly what he'll do. So likely he would have turned against the dark gods. But what we end up getting is this depiction of Jean Grey as this new version of the Phoenix. Now, it doesn't have a name, right? It's not called the White Phoenix of the Crown. We don't definitively know what it is, at least not that I'm aware of. You know, Stephanie Phillips may name it at some point in time. But much like what we've seen with Storm in the Solo series, as you guys are noticing, the X-Men are getting huge power buffs in Marvel Comics. I mean, these guys are getting absolutely amped, and I am here for it. If there's anything I love in Marvel, it's overpowered characters. Ridiculously OP characters. It's just so fascinating. But what you also have is a Jean who is in tune with her own history, come to grips with her own history, and has made peace with her own history. And that is seemingly how she's become so powerful. Now, how you reconcile this with previous statements from Marvel, and like the Chris Claremont run, for example, where the Phoenix, speaking to Xavier, had said, "I am the only home in which Jean Grey resides. We are in unison. We're one in the same person." Basically, these statements that have indicated that Jean and the Phoenix have already shared a perfect bond that could not become any more perfect than it already was. I don't quite know, right, how you square that circle. But Stephanie Phillips is presenting this to us, and we're kind of going forward from here. But I will say, Jean Grey, if she is beyond the power of the White Phoenix of the Crown, she's probably the most powerful being in the multiverse right now. Like this moment in Marvel. More powerful than the Living Tribunal, more powerful than the Beyonders, more powerful than any of those guys. Right now, this is just me kind of throwing out a thought, but that's what it looks like here. And so that's where she starts addressing like Rocket Raccoon, because Rocket is just kind of like, are you okay? Right? Because we already know you're a little unstable, right? There's been instances, Jean, where the engine's running, but there's nobody behind the wheel. You know what I mean? So I'm a little worried because the last time that you came out with a whole new outfit while you were the Phoenix, it's because you became malevolent and you tried to like literally destroy everything in existence. But that's where she basically tells him, no, right? This is different. I gave up the power of the Phoenix to Adon because I thought it would save the universe, protect it from Thanos' plan and the Warlock's Eye. But now I can feel that it's tearing Adon apart and the very fabric of reality along with her. I will put the universe back together piece by piece if that is what is required of me. And it's best if both of you were somewhere safe. And she just whisks them away, right? With like just a single thought. But keep in mind here, right? Adon still has a portion of the Phoenix locked inside her. Now for the statement of PERRIKUS, it really seems like she has a very small portion inside of her, right? A fraction of what Jean Grey has. But Jean Grey, even with this newfound level of power, is still an incomplete Phoenix. So it'd be interesting to see what she looks like when she has the full totality of her abilities. And so with what happens next, do not let this scenario fool you, right? That Jean is still very much in control and far beyond Adani. And the reason why I say that is because Adani lashes out at PERRIKUS, right? Like, what good are you or any of you guys as dark gods? You promised you'd give me power. I will not go back to being nothing. I will not give this power up. Because what's happening is she's feeling the power of the Phoenix slowly begin to slip away. And PERRIKUS tells her, like, you need to calm down. You need to gain a better control of your emotions. The fact that you hold a portion of the Phoenix means you still share a link with Jean. A way in is a way out, which means you can siphon the Phoenix away from her. Now, of course, PERRIKUS doesn't know that Jean has a whole new level of power. Fat chance that happens. Right? That's not going to happen at all. But at the end of the day, the statement is still made that she can bring the Shadow Realm into this universe given what little power she has. That yes, to a degree, she is unstable, but she can still pull it off. And so what ends up happening is that under the direction of Magiston Zelia, basically the person that leads the Shadow Realm and the person that PERRIKUS answers to, that these guys basically merge into something called the Union. And the Union is what happens when they become a kind of consolidated being. And so when that's happening and she becomes a host for the full totality of the Dark God's power, she now becomes something akin to what Jean Grey is, albeit the antithesis of Jean Grey. And even Adani says, Jean assumed that our paths were similar, that we both distrusted the immense powers thrust upon us and would work to control them. But she could not conceive of that power corrupting my soul, the soul of a girl who watched her father be killed by a dark god, a girl who was taken to the god quarry to be judged, a girl who just wanted to be more than 1,000 little broken pieces. Where Jean hesitated, fearing what that power would turn her into, I saw a path to freedom. Jean thought she could save me because she saw herself in me, but I didn't want saving. I wanted control. And that's where Jean says that's what it means to be the Phoenix, to stand alone as a boundary in the universe. As Jean Grey, I wanted to keep my humanity and still wield this power. I believed in compromise, but sometimes compromise is a mask for weakness, and I am done with weakness. And this is an accurate statement here, right? There comes a point in Marvel Comics when characters achieve a level of power that who they become is starkly different from who they used to be. And with Jean Grey, that was exactly it. She wanted to stay her human self while wielding the power of the multiverse in the palm of her hands. But once she became the perfect host for the Phoenix Force, she transcended her humanity. She transcended far beyond what it meant to be a regular person who just has some pretty incredible abilities. And her refusal to accept that created a kind of cognitive dissonance where her actions and her beliefs were not in unison with each other. And so that's why she says, I will bring the Shadow Realm to me. I will create a fracture in reality so vast, it will draw the Shadow Realm's energy to me like a predator smelling blood. I will give the shadows a place to take root, a place to feed, a trap they cannot resist. I've faced monsters before. I've had nightmares with sharper teeth and darker eyes. These shadows are no different, just hungry like everything that comes from the dark. They think I'm just another light to be devoured, but I am so much more. I am the one who holds the line, no matter how deep that darkness goes. Most believe darkness consumes light, and I am more than happy to prove them wrong. Or maybe prove myself wrong. And she says, I've spent so long afraid of my own light, afraid of those very same consumptive powers. What if they consumed more than just the shadows? What if they consumed me? But that's a selfish way to think, to let my own fear and guilt drive my actions, to stop me from spreading that light into the darkest corners of the universe where I might be able to help. And that's where Adani confronts her. And it's like, do you really think that's easy? right? You really think it's that easy, Jean? And she says, that's the problem with you, right? You feel like you can just show up onto the scene and just be a hero, and the world and the universe will embrace your heroism because you're a hero. And that's what heroes do, right? They get parades and people celebrate them and people love them. And where Jean comes and says, I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry that this happened to you, Adoni. The response of Adoni, do not pity me, right? I'm fine. I'm better than fine. I had no power, none. I couldn't stop PERRIKUS. I couldn't get you out of my mind. Now I know I can kill you. I can take the rest of the Phoenix Force and do anything I want to. Now again, Adoni is possessed here, but Jean Grey does not kill her. And it's an important thing because Jean could. With the level of power she has, she could just snuff this girl out of existence like that. And so Adoni appears to get the upper hand. But in Adoni's recklessness, right, in the fact that she's so caught up emotionally in the situation, she's not thinking or fighting logically. So what appears to be the upper hand is not about her winning, it's about Jean Grey almost allowing herself to lose. And that's why Adoni continues on this whole thing and says, your ego, you thought, snap your fingers and just fix it all. And where Jean says, you are not too far gone, the response of Adoni is, you cannot fix this and you cannot fix me. And so in attacking Jean, she almost seems to overcome her, and she kind of does. And the last thing we see here is where Jean is just kind of floating through the nexus of realities by Adoni, who's bringing the full totality of the Shadow Realm into the main Marvel Universe. But understand, guys, I don't know exactly where Stephanie Phillips is going with this, but if she's going where I think she's going, and I could be wrong here, this is a whole kettle of beans that Adoni is opening that she's not prepared for. Because keep in mind, it's not just other dimensions and other realities out there that you have to worry about. It's the things in between those realities, right? The many-angled ones. Guys like Shumagorath that exist in the spaces between universes, basically the superflow. And that if they enter into this universe will go the same way as the Cancerverse. It'll be consumed by the many-angled ones, everyone will be corrupted by it, and there'll be no way to stop it. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. I will say Stephanie Phillips' Phoenix story is amazing. I love what she's doing here. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I will catch you all later. Peace.